Today's the 30th of June, and being exactly at the midpoint of the year is the perfect time to look back on what I've already read in 2026. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the best books I've read, whether they were backlist or new releases, on this side of the year. These were all 5-star reads for me, and while I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one, just assume that I'm also absolutely raving about all of them. Now, these books are in no particular order. They're not organised by date or by preference. I got this down to 10 and we're not going to make these babies fight out anymore. These are my top 10 books. The order in which they fall in that top 10, I honestly don't know. The only way that I will kind of group them for you is by whether they are the first in a series, the last in a series, continuing, a standalone, that sort of thing. The first one I'm going to talk about is a graphic novel, and I really don't read a lot of graphic novels, so when one wins me over to the point that I'm rating it 5 stars, I know that I have had a massive success. This is Worst Man by Brant & Stein, and I read this during the Amazing Readathon just this month. We're following Rad, who is a professional worst man. He is hired by families who think that a marriage is a bad idea to basically mess up the wedding and prove to the couple that they don't belong together. In this one, he is hired by the mother of the bride, who just so happens to be a crime lord and a very dangerous woman. Radcliffe goes with the wedding party to a deserted island and begins to cause as much chaos as he can. However, with various hapless wedding guests or criminals running wild, there is even more madness than he expects. I loved the artwork style in this. It was bright and colourful, but there's just something about the style that really worked for me personally. This was comped as White Lotus meets Glass Onion, and I think that gives you a really good sense of what's going on, just with a little bit more chaos and alien romance. Another genre I don't read an awful lot of, so when one does well, I know it's a hit, is middle grade. I really nowadays only read middle grade during middle grade March. I tend to save up those middle grades so I can take. The Body Under the Piano is from a new to me author, Marina, and it's the first book in her Aggie Morton Mystery Queen quartet. This is following Aggie, who is designed by the author to be essentially a 12-year-old, and her sleuthing sidekick, Hector Poirot. So we know that we're doing a lot of Christie. When Aggie finds a dead body in her dance studio, Hector and she team up to try and clear various people's names. I really loved the setting here. We're in early 1900s Torquay, which is just a really specific setting, which I enjoy. It's not just vaguely English countryside, it's a specific seaside town. And that felt like it was really grounded in this kind of pretend child Agatha Christie angle. I also loved that we had multiple different women in this book, in this time period, that all had very strong personalities in different ways. I think that is especially important in middle grade, to be showing the different ways women can be strong, not having to fit into one mould. Another aspect I really liked was consequences. Aggie and Hector are running about like little scamps trying to solve this mystery, and they actually have some repercussions when they mess things up, when they speak to someone they don't realise is a journalist, and that comes back to bite them. I really liked this idea of realism that it had, despite the middle grade murder mystery. Moving on to standalones, we're going to start with a very short one, and it was The Summer War by Naomi Novik. This comes in just under 150 pages. It has a really nice cover, and it saved my bacon on one of the books with a musical instrument on the cover prompt that seemed all over the place this year, and I was not feeling confident on at all. In this we are following a young noblewoman who has kind of inherent magical talents. When she accidentally curses her older brother to live a life without love, she sets about trying to undo that curse and finds herself betrothed to a vengeful Fae King. This at one point was sold to me by someone as unofficially a Cersei redemption arc from Novik, and I think you can definitely see the roots of her fandom passions in here. So this is very much redemption for the Lannisters, and I absolutely loved it. The world building there was interesting. We had a real complexity of these characters and the dynamics and the relationships between them in an incredibly short space of time. Another standalone was The Unicorn Hunters by Catherine Arden. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year. I knew from the Winter Night trilogy that I loved Catherine Arden's writing, but I did find the first book in that trilogy a little slow going plot-wise. The Unicorn Hunters had none of those problems. I thought that the writing was as lyrical as I was expecting, and although we are doing a lot of politics, so there is a lot of world building and a lot of build-up, I felt the pacing hit much better. This is a magical semi-alternate history where we are following Anne, the Duchess of Brittany. She has recently taken over the duchy after her father's death, and she's trying to keep it independent despite the fact that the King of France wants to marry her so he can subsume Brittany into his kingdom. To do this, she comes up with a very cunning ploy where she and her court are going to go off on a hunt for a mythical unicorn into an almost magical black zone so that the king's scryers won't know who she is, and while that's happening, she's going to arrange a marriage alliance of her own to get around him. I wouldn't say it's a real politicking type of fantasy book. The magic is definitely at the forefront, but I really liked seeing these fictionalized versions of Anne of Brittany, I think they've changed her name, and in this it's Marguerite of France instead of Anne of France, because that would be confusing. I really liked seeing these two very powerful women, the way they're trying to outthink each other and manipulate each other, and the magic aspect tied in really well. It had a very folkloric feel, which I think tracks with what Arden has wrote in the past, and I just had a fantastic time with it. Then the last standalone is How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days by Jessie Silva. I read this one back in January, so the fact I'm still thinking about it now shows how well it's held up. It's also a cozy romantasy. I was unsure about whether it would hit in my wheelhouse. Cozy works for me sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. I don't like low stakes, but I like cozy vibes. And romantasy, again, can be hit or miss. But this one worked. Yes, it does exactly what it says in the tin. It is very cozy. It has a slow burning romance. It had a very autumnal, I think, feel to it. But it also tackled some themes that were really interesting and unexpected in terms of isolation and cultural rejection, prejudices, and being manipulated by people in power. In this, we're following a halfling called Pansy and a goblin called Wren. Pansy inherits a cottage from her grandmother that is away from her village, which is a little bit like Hobbiton, and in the woods. When she gets there to take possession of the cottage and to start this independent life away from all the other small-minded people in her town, she finds that Wren is already staying there, using it as a place to grow crops that the goblin people desperately need. The two of them have a dispute and both make elegant cases for why they should take control of the cottage, and so they come up with an agreement where the first one to leave loses all rights to it, and then we get a kind of awkward house sharing, slow burn bonding, lots of cultural misunderstandings, which I really liked, and that slow burn cozy romance. Now we come to 3 first books in a series, and all of these were 5 stars. All of them are series I am very excited to continue as soon as I'm able. The first one was His Face is the Sun by Michelle Habez Corpora. This is a YA, which I was surprised at. Ancient Egypt inspired, multi-POV, political and magical fantasy. We have 4 characters: a priestess who gets actual insight from the gods. We have a princess whose brother is trying to take over from her father. We have a farmer's daughter who is leading a rebellion. And we have a tomb robber who has unleashed an ancient evil upon the world. I loved the book. I thought it had really good pacing. I loved all 4 characters. I did have favourites and my favourites shifted throughout the book, but all 4 of them were really well written. All 4 of them had a storyline that I think held up on its own, had its own rises and troughs, had its own character development. Any one of them probably could have been an entire book in their POV and given you a really strong story, but I loved the way they kind of moved around each other and came together by the end. This one I am actually currently reading the sequel to, which is She Knows All the Names. Then we have The Raven Scholar, the first in the Eternal Path series by Antonia Hodgson. I had heard so much hype about this one. I had seen no bad reviews. I kept thinking it wasn't for me because the scholar part of it had made me think this was dark academia, and I don't really get along with that. But it's actually fantastic political fantasy. We are in a world where the Emperor's, I think it's a 15-year term, has come to an end, and there's a competition going on to find the new Emperor from amongst 12 candidates. In this world, there are various religious sects who follow different animal deities and try to emulate the traits of those deities. From those sects, each one is able to put forward a candidate, and we're now in a Hunger Games type PvP battle to see which one of them is going to come out on top. I love a challenge book, especially where the challenges were each unique because they were tied into one of the gods and their preferences. So we had not just actual battles, but we had challenges of wit and kindness. I really liked seeing which challenge would come up next and how our candidates would tackle it. Protagonist Nima, the Raven Scholar, is chosen as a candidate for the Raven Wing when the original candidate is found murdered on the opening morning of the ceremony. Unpopular as she is among her fellow ravens, suspicion is immediately thrown onto her, and the Emperor gives her a second chance to get out from under this crime, this accusation, if she can enter the competition and solve the murder at the same time. I had a great time with this one. It was an easy 5-star read. I had my mind completely blown by all the twists along the way, the surprises. The book has an amazing couple of opening chapters that went so much harder than I was expecting. I genuinely didn't think that Hodgson would keep some of the elements she put in right at the start. I thought we would roll those back in some way because they were just such bold choices, and I had just a wild ride. I am very, very excited to get to the sequel for this one, The Fox in Winter, when it comes out, I think in 2027. And then the last new series is Prince Weaver by Elian J. Morgan. This is about a land rich in magic, kind of folklore, myth, that is being occupied by a neighbouring force, a neighbouring kingdom, much more military, but one who don't have that magic and mythicism and want to wipe that out. Mailer is an apothecary in this world who has hidden magic of his own, and when he gets into an altercation with the palace guards, it's actually the crown prince that steps in and saves him. They enter into an arranged sham marriage to promote the prince's new ideals for their two countries. And while that's happening, a string of magical murders start to occur, and obviously Mailer is the court's main suspect. So the two have to start investigating what's going on. I really liked the magical murder mystery elements. I thought the fantasy and the dark elements of those kind of deaths was really well written. But my favourite aspect of it was the way that this takes very, very clear inspiration from England and Wales and the dynamic between the two of them. And it talks about how oppressors can wipe out a country's culture, their language, their stories, as well as just subjugating their peoples with military might. It talks about the erasure of those languages and how that impacts what's left of the culture and how you're able to resist the occupying force once that's been taken away from you. I thought it was really, really good. I would like to hear more Welsh opinions on the story, but I thought it was fantastically done. Some brilliant points were made. There's also a nice slow burn romance here, and I personally have said before, I think this would be perfect for anyone that was a fan of the BBC Merlin TV series. On to books later in series, and one that I hope is continuing a series and not finishing it, I don't actually know, but I would love for the series to keep going and going, is Mirage City, the fourth book in the Evander Mills series by Lev A.C. Rosen. These are historical noir mysteries. We're following Andy Mills. He is a disgraced detective who has now set up as a private investigator. Books are set in 1950s San Francisco, and they always tend to be dealing with some kind of queer issue of the time. And right from the start is a closeted gay cop, and we see some of that police discrimination. Then the first book looks at lavender families in Lavender House. We had censorship in one book and Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the Navy in one book. This one is to do with various kind of queer rights organisations and the different approaches they take, as well as missing persons and medical malpractice, conversion therapy ideas. The books as a whole are a little bit darker than my usual mysteries. These aren't cozies, they are kind of classic mystery / noir. I really enjoy the world building. I think Rosen does an absolutely fantastic job of showing how hard life could be for queer people in these times, while also not making it a real, gloom and doom misery porn situation. We see characters that, yes, they're struggling in their lives, but they are also building those lives and those communities. And over the course of the 4 books, we've seen Andy embrace who he is more and become more and more involved in the queer community around him. And I would happily read, another dozen of these books. Then the last book is more of, I could say it's the series because I did reread the first 2 books in this trilogy this year too, and those got 5 stars again. So it's a 5-star trilogy that is now sadly over. But this is the London Calling trilogy by Alexis Hall. It starts with boyfriend material, goes on to husband material, and this year's installment was father material. These are rom-coms set in London, and we start out with a fake dating scenario. Luke is the son of 2 aging rock stars. He works for a slightly useless charity, but when he finds himself in the papers through no fault of his own, his reputation is called into question, and Luke needs to get some respectability on his side quickly, and so he agrees to fake date Oliver, who is a very respectable solicitor. I genuinely adore this series. There is some great mental health representation here, both in Luke and in Oliver. There is some wonderful found family, very Bridget Jones's Diary style friendship going on. There is some great looks in each book at relationships and romance and friendships and family, and whether you need to hit all of the milestones that everyone seems to think you need to hit, or whether you can create versions that work for you and be just as happy and successful. These are also hilarious books. I love Alexis Hall's humour, and I think that really shines through in these ones. Father material specifically, we are dealing with Luke and Oliver well into their relationship. They decide to adopt a dog and then expand their family in other ways. So those are the 10 best books I read this year. I love all of them. I would recommend any of these if you're even remotely interested, completely wholeheartedly. Assume that any of these I would forcibly push into your hands and stand over you while you read, because I thought they were all fantastic. I really hope that I'm going to find another fantastic 10 books in the next 6 months of the year, and I'd be interested to see how those books will hold up to these ones. Let me know what your most successful books have been this year, whether they are new releases or backlist. I'm really excited to hear what you have been enjoying the most. If you don't have anything in particular you want to say, but you want to show you were here, leave me some kind of animal emoji for the Raven Scholar and Father material. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that I'll see you in future videos. Goodbye.